Welcome to From Chaos to Code, Rebuilding the Iron Mind, where we talk about the real side of men's health. Not the Instagram highlight reel, not the fake stoicism, but the honest effects that happen when life hits you harder than any workout ever could. I'm your host, Ricardo, and I've lived a few different lives. Teacher, property manager, MMA promoter, garage mechanic, handyman, empath. I've been the man everyone leans on, the one who fixes things. Until the weight of it all almost broke me. Here, we want to talk about what that really costs. When being the strong one becomes survival instead of strength. How burnout, silence, and pride slowly eat away at you until you realize you've built armor so thick that you can't even breathe under it. This isn't about weakness, it's about rebuilding. Learning that real strength isn't about how much you can carry. It's about knowing when to set it down. So let's start there, with the cost of being the strong one and what it actually takes to reclaim your iron mind. Welcome back to From Chaos to Code. The title of our podcast today is The Weight We Don't Talk About: Strength, Silence, and the Rebuild of the Mind. Now, we know that every man carries weight. Some carry it on their shoulders, others deep behind the eyes. That tired kind of darkness that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from seeing too much for too long. That's the weight I want to talk about today, the kind that men never mention, the kind that shows up as aggression, isolation, emotional shutdown, or maybe that non-stop need to keep winning just to prove you're still standing. Now, this episode is not about being softer. It's about being stronger in ways most of us were never taught. Real strength isn't just power under load, it's control under fire. It's knowing when to push, when to pause, and when to finally breathe. We're going to break down what happens when men bury pain, what real stoicism actually means, and how to rebuild a mind that can carry weight without collapsing under it. Now, I'll back all of this up with voices that live in both science and experience. I'm going to reference my favorite neuroscientist, Andrew Huberman, trauma expert Bessel Kolk, stress researcher Robert Sapolsky, and emotional intelligence psychologist Marc Brackett. Because their work explains a lot of what we've all felt, but have never had the words to articulate. Let's talk about the very first portion: men's silence and internalized pain. Now, most of the guys I know are fluent in silence. We were trained that way. We learned early on that showing pain could be used against us. In work, in competition, in relationships, and especially in our lifestyles. You keep your guard up because vulnerability gets exploited. So you stay dominant, stay useful, stay busy. You survive by never giving anyone the chance to think you're weak, because you're fucking not. The problem is, silence doesn't dissolve pain, it just buries it. Dr. Bessel Kolk, he wrote the book The Body Keeps Score, said something that hit me. Traumatized people chronically feel unsafe inside their bodies. The past is alive in the form of gnawing interior discomfort. Now, that line defines what so many of us live: strength through suppression. But what feels like strength is often hypervigilance, that constant readiness to act. Now, hypervigilance means your nervous system never clocks out. You're always scanning for threat, even when you're sitting at home. It's what gives me such bad insomnia sometimes. And when you live like that long enough, the body starts to keep score. It'll show up physically in tension headaches, grinding teeth. I have to wear a mouth guard every frickin' night. Gut issues. So many of us have those. Insomnia. Drinking too much just to shut the system down for a few hours. Or whatever other vice you might jump into to numb and distract yourself. And the problem is, some of our lifestyles encourage these actions. But the body remembers what the mind refuses to face. That silence, that control becomes its own language. But it's when the body eventually translates back to you through pain. What happens next? Well, that trauma turns into aggression or overdrive. Dr. Andrew Huberman over at Stanford says aggression isn't random. It's a process. Aggression's good. I love the fact that I'm an aggressive individual, but it has to be calculated. It has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. When that process gets interrupted, the brain loops it. You stay stuck halfway through the fight, waiting for release. And that's why we chase adrenaline through work or overworking, the gym, training, speed, or just chaos. Because it feels good for a while. It's your brain trying to complete the stress cycle. Now, Huberman talks about this like a neurological feedback loop. Every time we push hard through work, heavy training, high speed risk, that throttle therapy, the brain rewards us with dopamine. But the more we do it, the less it hits. That's how workaholism, overtraining, thrill-seeking become their own addictions. The brain stops caring about peace. It just wants another spike, just wants another hit. But Dr. Robert Sapolsky said stress is meant to be short-term. The body's emergency mode. But when you live in that mode all the time, the system starts eating itself. You lose muscle faster, your sleep crashes, your temper shortens, your testosterone tanks. It's that empty feeling when you're in the gym. You're pushing it hard and you just feel tired. If you've ever been at the end of a cycle, it's that same feeling after 8 or 12 weeks of sauce. You might look hard, but inside, you're falling apart. Now, some people's nervous systems get so used to crisis that calm feels dangerous. I've been through this multiple times. It is absolutely brutal. I've seen it in myself and other men. We can't sit still because silence brings up everything we've been outrunning. So we fill it with work, we fill it with weight, with wheels, anything to keep moving, but that's not healing. That's hiding. And when you never learn to shut that system off, you live in fight mode all the time. Now let's talk a little bit about your nervous system, because when I say fight mode, there's more to it. In reality, the nervous system only has 4 modes: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Fight means to confront. Flight means escape, get the hell away from. Freeze means to completely shut down. Fawn means to appease. You do anything to avoid conflict in order to get that moment of peace. And what you'll find is you'll go through these processes. You start off with fight, and it's always a fight. It's always a fight. Next thing you know, something hits, and you might just freeze. It's not your typical response, and this is where you start to feel lost. Every man has a default, and the goal isn't to erase it, it's to recognize it and control it. Now, that doctor I mentioned before, Robert Sapolsky, he spent his entire career studying stress hormones. He put it perfectly. The problem isn't that testosterone can increase aggression. The problem is how often we reward aggression. By we, I mean rewarding yourself or rewarding others. In some lifestyles, let's face it, aggression isn't just accepted, it's currency. It's how you move up, it's how you survive. But here's the truth. If your body never exits flight mode, it'll burn itself down. Might take a month, might take a year, might take 10 years, but it's going to happen. So the same intensity that protects you in danger destroys you in peace. And I know that's what a lot of us are finding. At this point in our lives, we're finding some sort of peace, and we do not know how to deal with it. We're still in that fight mode. And we're trying to find ways to cope with it because it feels so different from what we're used to. So it's not about changing who you are, it's about adapting to the lifestyles. The challenge here is finding reprieve, building short exits from that fight. That can mean structured training instead of reckless pushing, a walk instead of another argument, time alone instead of noise. When I wasn't doing martial arts and I was just weightlifting, I was doing security at a show and my one buddy summed it up. He looked in my eyes, he said, "You need to do something to be able to control the crazy." He said, "I see it in you." Not that I was a threat to everybody around me, but he could see that extreme restlessness. He said, the gym just doesn't do it. You need something like your Filipino martial arts, Muay Thai, boxing, whatever it is I was doing, in order to make sure that you have that reprieve. It's structured. It's intellectual. It's not just trying to mash out the weights in the gym. You don't have to drop your armor, but you have to know when to set it down. Now, let's talk about my next section, the myth of the strong man and emotional literacy. I'm going to educate you today. Somewhere along the way, we redefined strong to mean emotionless. That's not strength. That's shutdown. So real stoicism, as the old philosophers meant it, wasn't about suppressing feelings. Real stoicism is about governing them, feeling the chaos, understanding it, and then choosing your response instead of being owned by it. You can feel rage, you can feel grief, even fear. And you can still act with discipline. That's power. Dr. Marc Brackett from Yale calls that emotional intelligence. Recognizing, understanding, and managing what's happening inside you. Huberman says that emotions are your body's budget report. The affect is a quick and dirty summary of your body budget, meaning that when you sleep, when you sleep, your nutrition, your recovery are off, your emotions are going to follow. So being emotionally aware isn't softness, it's strategy. If you know you're under recovered, not overtraining, you're under recovered, or that you haven't been eating, you haven't been drinking enough water, you haven't been sleeping enough, you have to acknowledge and be aware of this. You need to try and solve that as soon as possible. Because any man who can read his own state can also read a room. You could diffuse the situation. You could control escalation before it starts because you're fully in control of yourself. That's not weakness. That's tactical intelligence. Emotional literacy doesn't make you less of a man. It makes you more effective, more trusted, and more dangerous in the right way when you want to be or when you choose to be. Well, what did I discover about myself in all of this? Well, I definitely used to think that strength meant control. You'll hear me say this in other podcasts. It was control over myself, control over my situations, making sure I was never cracking, never showing. But I've learned that my real strength means capacity. Being able to carry all of this without it breaking me. So stoicism to me isn't about shutting off. It's about owning emotions before it owns you. I'm no one's bitch, especially not to my emotions. Mental strength doesn't come from pretending you're bulletproof. It comes from knowing how to rebuild after you've been hit. And that's what a lot of this is about in my podcast. We're talking about rebuilding. You're still strong. But you can't just stay in one singular state and expect it to stay consistent. You're going to get hit. You're going to get knocked down. How do we rebuild? Well, for me, I found three things. My rebuild rests on routine, self-honesty, and brotherhood. My routine keeps my body in rhythm when my mind wants absolute chaos. Self-honesty means dropping the performance. So I admit what's actually going on instead of masking it with work or noise. I'm an expert at masking. I've had to go see psychologists because of this, where I just cover everything up. Even I walked in one day and the psychologist was commenting on my pristine suit. But he said, given the state of my mind at that point, even the way I was wearing my clothing was masking. It wasn't how I felt. It was making sure I did not show anybody that I was in chaos. And my third one, brotherhood, the right kind of brotherhood. I surround myself with men who don't need to compete in order to connect. Now, like-minded for brotherhood doesn't mean identical. It means you're aligned. My brothers live by a code. They hold the line. They'll call me out if I drift. What you should do is stay the hell away from the ones who feed your vices, not your discipline. Because those people will burn every bit of progress you build, and stay just as far away from the weak. I don't mean the wounded, not the ones who are fighting to get better, or the young, or someone who's just learning. I don't mean those. They are not weak. I mean the people who choose weakness, the ones who'd rather live as victims than take responsibility. You can protect people who need it. You can lead men who want to grow, but you can't save anyone who's addicted to their own excuses. One of my female friends said this to me when I was in another bad relationship. She said, listen, you can't save them all. These kind of people will drain your focus. They'll dull your edge. They'll pull you back into that mud you crawled out of. So, make sure with your friends, every one of them sharpens you. They shouldn't soften you. And I talk about rebuilding. But how do you rebuild without numbing out? So a lot of us only know two options: explode or shut down. That's it. Anger, withdrawal. But there's a third. And this is the part that we need to focus on. Process. It's not immediate. It takes time. But processing pain means giving it motion and meaning without letting it run your life. Start small. Move. When the stress builds, move your body. Run, lift, push-ups, whatever you need to do. Physical motion completes the biological stress cycle that talking alone can't. If you've ever had it where your mind is running 1,000,000 miles a minute, and because of that, your body is absolutely unnerved, you can control your body at that moment. The next one, and this is me as the English teacher, I've had to do this, write. Get those thoughts out of your head. Text them down, put them in a note, pen and paper, whatever you need to do. You don't need poetry. You're not sitting here trying to express yourself in that sense. I mean, unless that's your thing. What you need to do is just write honestly. Because you'll find that writing clarifies chaos. I mean, fucking burn it or delete it afterwards if you need. Just get it out. You're not alone. Connect. Pick up the phone. Sit with someone who's done their work, not someone who's going to drown with you, not someone who's going to feed this loop you're in. Isolation really distorts reality. I've absolutely found this when I'm withdrawn, if I'm going through something health-wise, if I'm going through extreme stress, relationship bullshit, as I talked about in one of the first few podcasts. So when you become isolated, you picture the world differently than it really is. Seek connection. Connection's going to reset that. And here's the part a lot of us don't want to do. Reflect. 10 minutes before bed. No phone, no noise. Just sit with yourself and ask, where did I act from fear today? Where did I act from code? And let's talk about that term, because when I say fear, I don't mean panic or cowardice. You're not a pussy. I mean that subtle kind, the instinct that makes you react instead of respond. Fear can look like control, needing to dominate a situation so that you don't feel small. Fear can look like anger. Explode first so no one sees that you're uncertain. Fear can look like silence. You shut down because you don't trust yourself to stay calm. Fear can sometimes look completely different. It can look like overachievement. You grind endlessly because if you rest, it feels like weakness. I have to force myself to sit down and watch TV sometimes. I was always taught growing up that I have to be productive every second of every single day. But now I have to learn how to rest. So when you reflect and you track all these moments, you start to see the difference between what's reactive and what's rooted. If you're acting from fear, you're just trying to protect your ego. If you act from code, you're protecting your integrity. So, masculinity isn't a look. Masculinity in its true form is your integrity under pressure. Let's talk about that term masculinity. How do you have balanced masculinity, and how does that work with survival? Now, these days, masculinity is split right down the middle. One side says it's toxic, open up more, cry more, talk about everything. Then the other side says, lock it down, harden up, don't let anyone see you bleed. Now, neither of these extremes are going to work on their own. Real masculinity isn't about choosing strength and softness. It's about knowing when to use each. And some of you naturally do this. You know when to be strong. You know when to lock it down. But if you're around your little kid, you're not going to sit here and be this immovable object that doesn't show any emotion. Balanced masculinity means logic with empathy, power with restraint. It's that ability to stay composed without going cold, without shutting out everyone. So suppression doesn't do this. Suppression is just avoidance. And then if you are on the other side and you have vulnerability and you have no stability, that's just chaos. But then if you're stable without any vulnerability, that's just emptiness. I had a psychologist friend tell me one time, I was in the gym, I was super fucked up at the time, coming off roids, nothing was going right. And he said to me, listen, life is a scale from 1 to 10. He said, what you're doing by being cold, shut down, and on guard all the time is you're living your life at a 5. He said, you're living your life at a 5 because you think it's safe. He said, because you don't want to collapse, you don't want to fully break down and risk a 1. But if you don't risk experiencing those 1s, how could you ever experience a 10? And he finished it by telling me, he said, isn't it time that you allowed yourself a 10? That's where I realized mental strength isn't about dodging pain or pretending you don't feel it. It's about building a system around you that can hold you while you feel it. It's 2 paths at once. That system's going to hold you. You're going to have to feel it, but those feelings aren't going to take you down with it. And I've said this before, that system looks like structure, it looks like discipline, consistent sleep, movement, a clear mission. I talk about this in episode 3. What's your mission? What's your purpose? Because you need a sense of purpose that pulls you forward. That mission, it's got to be bigger than just comfort. You can't just have this stagnant life that does nothing. Comfort dulls the edge. A mission is going to sharpen it. Maybe your mission is your family. Maybe it's your community. Maybe it's just developing your own personal code at the moment. But if it's only about being safe in that moment, it's too small to sustain you. The men who last the longest aren't the hardest or the loudest. They're the ones who found the balance between discipline and heart. That's the kind of strength that doesn't fade when the noise stops. Okay, I want to talk about practical takeaways, because practical takeaways are why you're here. I'm not just here to talk, I'm here so you can move away from this with something. So let's talk about what this actually looks like in real life. Not in theory, but in practice. Knowing the words doesn't change much if the actions stay the same. First, talk about this in the last episode. Build yourself a daily code. Something simple, something you can live by when everything else gets loud. Write it down if you have to. Stick it on the mirror, Goggin style. It could be how you train, how you lead, how you treat people, what you won't compromise on. Read it back to yourself when you start drifting. Second, move with purpose. Don't just train to punish yourself or to burn off frustration. Train to remind your body and your mind that you can still carry weight. Lifting, running, sparring, whatever your outlet is. It's not about ego. You're training for regulation. Don't overtrain. Don't underrest. You're regulating. Movement burns through that adrenaline. It'll recalibrate your nervous system. And in future talks, we'll talk about the biological aspects of how this actually functions. Next, work on something that matters. You need that mission. Something that outlives the day, something that builds. Could be family, some sort of project, a business, a cause. I don't care what it is. It doesn't matter. What matters is that it demands some sort of consistency. Comfort's going to fade. You will encounter comfort at some point. It feels awesome. It's not consistent. But purpose is going to endure. And that's what's going to let you get back to some comfort. Next piece I want you to take away, I want you to stay connected to the men who build. Surround yourself with the ones who sharpen you, the ones who call you out when you're slipping, not the ones who co-sign your excuses. You can't afford to keep men around who just thrive on distraction or gossip or chaos. I'll use that cliche. Iron sharpens iron. And this is the hard one. This is the one I have to force myself to do every single day. It's not something I've just learned. I'm still learning it. Take time alone to recalibrate. There's a difference between solitude and isolation. Solitude isn't isolation. It's maintenance. That's where you slow down long enough to hear your own signal instead of everyone else's noise. You have to sit with your thoughts. You can't just drown them out. You can't just suppress them. You have to sit with them. You have to feel them. Because that's where your next step usually shows itself. If you just suppress everything, you never get to that next step. And when things start to spin, because they're going to, don't ask yourself, how do I feel? The feelings change every 5 fucking minutes. Ask yourself, what do I need to stabilize myself right now? So you have to engage with those feelings. And when you engage with them, you need to think about how to stabilize yourself in that moment, and then you get to the next step. Strength doesn't run from stillness. It resets it so you can reload and you can rise again. I'll close on this. Don't feel guilty if you've carried darkness. Don't feel guilty if you're still in the darkness. That's fine. That's life. If you've carried darkness, it means you've carried life. So the goal isn't to drop it or run away from it or suppress it. It's just to carry it differently. The strongest men aren't the ones who never break. They're the ones who can rebuild without losing their humanity. I finished the last podcast with this line. I'm going to finish it again. Remember, diamonds don't form under praise. They form under pressure. Stay in that pressure. Obrigado. That's it for today's episode of From Chaos to Code, Rebuilding the Iron Mind. If something in this hit you, take a second to sit with it before you scroll away. Write it down, apply it, share it with a brother who might need to hear it. The whole goal here isn't perfection, it's progress. Real men doing the real work of getting stronger, clearer, and more grounded every day. If you want to keep these conversations going, subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen. And if you want to stay around after the episode, I'll be releasing tracks I've made using my own writing and AI music development. Each episode will feature a new track in a variety of genres that I use to express myself. Keep the chaos in check and keep the code alive. I appreciate all of you. Thanks for listening.
We sat in the lake under the ghost moon, wrapped in each other's embrace. You opened your world, I stepped inside, hoping to prove my love face to face. We sat in the lake. We sat in the lake under the ghost moon, wrapped in the scent of your perfume. Yeah, I took your brush, loosened your hair, each tender stroke drew me closer to you. We said we sat in the lake under the ghost, wrapped in the quiet of your tears. Each drop disturbed the mirrored sky, revealing the sorrow you tried to hide. The words that never reached my ears. We sat in the lake under the ghost moon, wrapped in what we left unspoken. I failed to brush away your tears, soft kisses between the brush strokes, but they couldn't calm the storm inside you. Two hearts too proud to break open. You walked into the lake under the ghost moon, wrapped in the waters of your fears. I called your name, the ripples came, but they only carry silence here. You disappeared into the lake under the ghost moon, leaving me here, wrapped alone in the moonlight. Now I return when the water is still, where memory and moonlight ain't. And I whisper to the silence, my very own.